Hello everybody. Welcome to my presentation. I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. I am Priyanka Bose. I am a PhD candidate at UNSW. My PhD is supported by an RTP scholarship from the Australian government and a Warotha scholarship from the New South Wales Department of Education. Coming from a Bengali multilingual immigrant family and now residing in Australia, I have been interested in the cultural representations in English language teaching textbooks. And this motivated my study. The first slide displays vignettes of articles from different cultures in Indian ELT textbooks. Indian textbooks have been in the news for various issues with cultural representations. An entire Wikipedia page is dedicated to controversies related to the Indian National Board NCERT textbooks. Further, a BBC article highlighted various issues of sexism in Indian textbooks, such as blaming women for unemployment and calling housewives as donkeys, in addition to claiming that meat eaters cannot be trusted. To place Indian ELT textbooks in context, India is the second largest English-speaking country in the world, second only to the United States with around 260 million English speakers. Yet very little is known about how cultural representations are addressed in ELT textbooks in India, except for one study by S. Bhattacharya, which showed the presence of gender bias in 3 grade 8 textbooks from a national and a state board, but did not provide any further insights on cultural representations. Engagement with such cultural representations is a crucial part of English language teaching, as the promotion of cultural understanding is one of the most significant objectives of language teaching, according to Byram. To address this important gap, I decided to explore the issue in ELT textbooks from a variety of regions of India. In doing this, I am cognizant of the fact that India is not a homogeneous context, with different states having different histories and experiences. Thus, my inquiry addressed the following question: how are cultural representations distributed in Indian ELT textbooks? Various research and theories inform my research on ELT textbooks. Kachru identified first language English countries as inner circle, and according to research by Sheen, Eslami and Chen and other researchers, a greater representation of these countries can be expected in the ELT textbooks of post-colonial countries. White characters may be better represented since chromaticism and the politics of color persist in countries like India, with white skin color being considered superior to other colors. Some researchers have claimed that the force of nativism has been identified as making inroads into Indian textbooks in the last few decades. Nativism asserts the rights and identity of the local and promotes antipathy of anything foreign. Last, but very importantly, sexism, stemming from historical patriarchal norms with underrepresentation of female characters, has been found in ELT textbooks. There are two frameworks that I utilize in my analysis of ELT textbooks. The first is the Cortese-Engine framework. It classifies ELT textbooks into three categories. Number one, target language culture, used by speakers whose first language is English. Number two, local or source culture, that is learners' own culture. And number three is international culture, which is various other cultures around the world. Generally, a balanced representation of all cultural materials is warranted. The second framework is useful for measuring the depth of cultural representations is the framework proposed by Song. Song proposed three levels of cultural representation, which with increasing level of depth are superficial interaction that involves the inclusion of description or conversation on physical cultural objects such as travel, food, clothing, and festivals. Hybridization includes the development of a new culture through the combination or fusion of two or more different cultural traditions. Example, the fusion of Maharaja Mac burger. It's a mixture of Indian and American burger. And finally, critical reflections that include in-depth discussion of the cultural concepts, histories, relationships, and values or conflicts that interact. For example, a discussion of the evidence of British colonialism by the textbook characters in Indian ELT textbooks. The aims of our research can be thus summarized as follows. While there can be several different ways of representing and interpreting culture in ELT textbooks, I was specifically interested in how the cultural representations of target, local or source culture and international cultures are distributed in the content or the stories, poems or essays of Indian senior secondary ELT textbooks. Second, I wanted to unravel how the cultural representations of race, age, gender, nationality, and culture, the target source or international culture of characters or persons were distributed in these books. Finally, I was interested in knowing if these textbooks had a significant representation of high-level cultural interactions as described by Song. This study utilized a sequential exploratory mixed method design with coding of collected qualitative data from text preceding quantitative analysis. Greenstein describes sequential mixed method design as a sequential combination of any of qualitative data collection and or analysis followed by quantitative data collection and or analysis or vice versa. That means quantitative followed by qualitative. In this study, qualitative information was quantitatively coded using content analysis, a method where text content is systematically coded into limited categories. The inquiry involved a sample of 10 Indian ELT textbooks used by senior secondary classes, years 11 to 12, including 2 published by the National Board, namely the Central Board of Secondary Education, CBSE, and the other 8 by 4 state boards from West Bengal, Gujarat, Punjab, and Kerala. The figure shows the locations of the states in India which are represented in this sample. In the analysis, each story or poem or essay in the textbooks was coded as belonging to one of the 3 source, target, or international cultures. The coding was done based on the setting and cultural content of the text, story, poem or drama, etc. For example, kite flying is an example of Indian or source culture, and by the author or poet, and characters in the text, for instance, is the play The Browning Version by Terence Rattigan as target culture. Second, further analysis was conducted to identify the representations of race, gender, or nationality from each of the three cultures. While we are cognizant of the fact that race is a social rather than a biological construct, we follow earlier convention and definitions from the United States Census Bureau to divide race into 5 categories: Asian, South Asian, white, black, and others. For instance, mixed race. Though South Asian is a subset of the Asian group, it was distinguished to highlight and separately enumerate their appearance in the textbooks. In the analysis, race was determined through the cultural identity of the author as well as the content of the text and supporting illustrations. Gender and nationality were determined by the name of the character or name of the author if the author is identified. Characters who could not be coded into nationalities, example animals in the story, the monkey and the crocodile, were coded into a NA category which is not applicable. Results were reported in terms of total percentages based on enumerations of the coded categories described above across textbooks for each board, with tables displaying the percentage distributions, and results for individual textbooks are not shown. Informed by song, the analysis also identified the themes and levels of cultural interaction in the textbooks. The percentage distribution of the levels of intercultural interaction in each textbook and in all textbooks together were calculated, in addition to summary measures for each state. The proportion of critical reflection and hybridization instances together relative to superficial interaction were compared using graphs, with one graph providing 95% confidence intervals for the difference in percentages. In addition to this, an inferential chi-square test was implemented. This test was implemented for individual states as well as in total for all of India. While a significant difference would imply that one form of cultural interaction dominated and a non-significant result where the percentage difference and its 95% confidence intervals encompassed 0 would imply similar levels of critical or hybridization and superficial interaction instances. This was to test if desirable forms of cultural material, example, the critical reflection or hybridization, were present in significant proportion, hence the need of a statistical test. I was responsible for the coding and interpretation process and have both an insider, the emic, and outsider, the etic perspective. I originate from an Indian non-native speaker background and have been exposed to a variety of English due to my higher education in India, Canada, and Australia. I am thus well placed to code the cultural content of the textbooks within my context. Within their context. I identified a dominance of target culture genre items, 49% in the textbooks. Most boards had over 40% of target cultural items. I found that the white racial group is dominant, 56% in the 10 textbooks, which was followed by South Asian, 31%. Because of the small percent of Asians who were not South Asian, black, mixed race, or people who could not be categorized into any racial categories, 6%, these categories were grouped into one other category. Of the states, West Bengal textbooks had a high percentages of the white racial group, 90%. With regard to gender representation, male characters were found to be dominant in all the surveyed textbooks, 66% compared to the female characters, 28%. The NCERT textbooks had the lowest percentage of female characters, 19%, compared to the textbooks from various states, which ranged from 23 to 36%. Punjab and Gujarat board textbooks had the highest fractions of critical reflection themes, around 46 to 47%. Thus, Kerala, West Bengal and NCERT textbooks, along with the overall total, showed a significant percentage of superficial cultural interactions relative to critical reflection contents. In Gujarat and Punjab textbooks, the percentage of reflection or hybridization contents were not significantly different from the percentage of superficial interaction contents, with a non-significant chi-squared statistic. The difference in percentages between the two types of contents in Gujarat and Punjab textbooks were 6% and 8% respectively. To summarize the findings of this study, the results revealed the general domination of cultural representations originating from Britain, an excessive proportion of British and Irish characters and white characters, a significant amount of gender bias, overall minimal in-depth cultural engagement, and a wide regional variations among Indian ELT textbooks. In addition, language teachers may adapt relevant cultural representations with other pedagogical resources to engage with English language learners in more critical pursuits. Here are the references if you are interested. Now, a big thanks to all of you for listening to my presentation. Thank you.